Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I am excited. We're here to talk about men's health, and with me today, I have my esteemed colleagues, which includes Senator L.G. Sims, Senator Napoleon Harris, and Senator Robert Peters. The inspiration for this panel came from Senator Simmons' bill, House Bill 4589, which creates a men's health division within the Illinois Department of Public Health. House Bill 4589 directs IDPH to create a division of men's health to raise awareness of health issues, particular to men that are not currently or adequately addressed by the department, including prostate cancer, testicular cancer, smoking cessation, heart disease, and mental health. So without any further ado, let's just jump right in it. And this question is to the panel. Question, why are Black men so hesitant to go to the doctor?
I'll start that off, Senator Belt. Just to start that with that question, why are Black men so hesitant? When you think about our community, Black men are being trained to be strong, to be leaders, to not cry, to not show emotion, to be inspirational, and all those things that we deal with just being a Black man in our community. There's a fear that something could be wrong, because we always say, no, we okay, because we've been trained to have thick skin, to have to not process things as we need to vent and let them out. We compartmentalize and hold things inside. And that leads to that fear, that ongoing fear that I don't want to go to the doctor because of what potentially they can say that could be negatively wrong with me, versus saying, hey, I need to go to the doctor so I can make sure that there is nothing wrong with me, so that I can prolong my health and my life and take care of myself. And I think that we need to break down those barriers by continually to have conversations like this and to promote education in that space, and do the things that we all on this call have been doing, with passing laws to make that access, that barrier, easier for Black men to be able to go to the doctor and be able to have that open dialogue with their primary care physicians to talk about their health, to make sure that our communities are healthier.
Very, very good point, Senator Harris. You bring up, and we're all from different parts of the state, but I think it's safe to assume we all grew up knowing that, or with that philosophy that we can't cry, that we have to, you hurt yourself, you got to fight through it, and all those things. All those things take away from us going to the doctor and seeing what's wrong with us, and then we pass it on to our kids, and it's a perpetual type of thing. And you're right, we have to break it. What about the historical significance of our experience in this country relative to healthcare? You think that plays a part in anything for us staying away from the doctor?
Yeah, I'll take that, Senator Belt. I mean, you've got the historical issues and problems that we've experienced, and natural conspiracies that we've been subjected to, with the beginning of the Tuskegee experiment, and those types of experiences have been relied on. And even as we've gone through the COVID-19 pandemic, trying to get people vaccinated, particularly and getting Black men vaccinated throughout that pandemic, a lot of folks relied on those conspiracies from the Tuskegee experiment to say, well, this is why I don't trust the healthcare system. This is why I don't trust government, because we've had these experiences in the past where when Black men have been subjected to experiences that have led to negative health outcomes. And then, building on the discussion that we're having in terms of who we are and how we are, you are seeing, trauma be passed generationally. We should be passing generational wealth, but instead we're passing generational trauma, because those things that you talked about, Senator Belt, in the opening, we've internalized those, and then we teach those behaviors to our children. And that's why, these kinds of conversations, I'm very glad that we're having this conversation, because it shows our desire and our ability to talk about our health differently. It talks about us being proactive about our health and being proactive about how we're going to be able to be here for our families, for our children, for our grandchildren. Because if we don't have these discussions, we don't have these very necessary, poignant discussions right now, then we won't be able to figure out and be here to establish those long-term impacts on our community.
Absolutely.
And if I could just add, I mean, so ProPublica did like a study did a story about how COVID broadly has been impacting Black men in terms of health, and particularly looking at the story of John Henry, and basically saying that when it comes to having to push through, right, a whole host of physical and emotional trauma, that Black men have often been pushed to the brink. When it comes to the level of investment in terms of healthcare, that Black men have been pushed to the brink, and that all that historical pain that the other senators have pointed out, really in the recent last couple of years and during this pandemic, have been particularly painful, and has been particularly deadly. And so when we think about, Black men and healthcare, we have to think about both the long-term systemic things that have existed, the barriers people have to go through to be able to, sort of meet the challenges that exist in life. And then the other one about this is that the sort of stereotype to get through those challenges that present an undue burden on someone's healthcare, right? And someone's health, their well-being. And so I think that ProPublica sort of digging in on the John Henry legend is, I think, a very important way to describe what we're going through right now, and over the last 3 years. And so to me, this is going to be, I think, the ultimate challenge, is that we have to think about this in the sense of how much we're going to invest in people's lives and their well-being. I mean, if you think about it, the combination of that trauma, and I know, I said to you before we did this, I'm trying not to talk too much, but the combination of things is that when you think about someone going through and living in a working class community, so Black men are more likely to be working class than almost anybody. At the same time, then more likely to face pressure and discrimination when it comes to education, when it comes to healthcare. Then at the same time, to meet more than anybody the levels of incarceration that are put onto folks. And then when you get out of that, not only depending on how your healthcare is when you're incarcerated, but when you come out of that, the barriers to be able to even lift yourself up in life, when it comes to healthcare, to jobs, to housing, those are all, you have to think about those as weights on your heart, weights on your arteries, weights on your shoulders, weights on your mental well-being. And so ultimately, I always think that this is constantly a fight to remove that weight, both inside ourselves, institutionally and systemically. And now I'm not going to talk too much longer.
Awesome.
I want to hear the beautiful voice of Senator Bell. You know what I mean?
So with that being said, all great answers, and I think they're all pervasive in our community. So if we expanding the base to that question, how then can we improve the experience for men so that they feel more comfortable going to the doctor? What does that look like, Senator Sims?
Yeah, I think, having, we talked about here, showing that the going to the doctor is not, it's not akin to finding out something that's wrong, but having a plan. It's no different than planning when let's for instance say if you're gonna mow your lawn, you don't just go out and mow your lawn. You have a plan for how you're gonna mow your lawn. You want to make sure you have the fertilizer in place. You have the seeds in place. If you have any dead spots, having a plan on how you're going to fix that and maintain it. So it's no different than your healthcare. We have to meet people where they are, and then understanding that in order to be successful, there's the adage that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, and those are not just words. That is a real layout for how you create a roadmap to success. So you have to plan for your success. If you want to live a long life, which all of us do. One of my mentor's greatest lines is that the older he gets, the older he wants to get. And and I think that's extremely telling for us. But if you're going to have those that longevity, you're going to have to plan for it, and that means having a plan for investing in your health, investing in your physical, but also your mental health. And I think that's part of this discussion I'm glad we're having, because we are talking about healthcare in a holistic way, not just about your physical health, but also your mental health. Because if you're not mentally well, then you're not physically well either. And we are talking about mental health and the trauma that we have, that men and Black men in particular have experienced, in a way that allows us to create that plan going forward for how we're going to be healthy. And when we identify and we see those problems and those challenges, we're able to come up with a plan to work through them and overcome them.
So Senator Harris, piggybacking off of what Senator Sims just laid out in terms of coming up with a plan, how do we educate all of the miseducation that has taken place over hundreds of years relative to Black men in this country? How do we peel that onion back so that we can teach them how to create that plan? What does that look like?
Well, first and foremost, it starts with conversations like we're having now. And it starts with men that we have on this call. We are leaders as legislators in our state. We are leaders, and people look to us for guidance, for information. And we have to be vulnerable as men to say, hey, it's okay to go to the doctor. It's okay to have a plan. It's okay to talk about this among brothers and men about challenges that you may be experiencing, whether it be physical or mental. And I think we have to normalize going to the doctor. That it's not normal in the Black community for Black men to say, hey, what you doing next week? Hey, I have a doctor's appointment scheduled. We only go to the doctor when something is detrimental, when something is terribly wrong. You like, man, I'm feeling so bad, I can't walk. But you had this pain for the last 6 months that you never went to go get checked on. So we have to normalize this type of behavior, and we can't let pride get in the way of our health. And I think a lot of times we allow that to happen in the Black community, where we're so prideful because we want to be seen as strong. We want to be seen as indestructible. And so when we have ailments, we don't go talk about it. We don't go to get follow-up checkups. And that lingers into ongoing health problems that lingers on and on and on for years and years and years. And so those are things that I think that we have to do as legislators and as Black men for our community, is continue to educate people on what's necessary from our vantage point about making that connection and establishing a relationship. I think relationships are so important. You have to establish a relationship with your primary care physician. We know that President Obama passed the Affordable Care Act on his time in office. We have to maintain that and uphold that everyone has an opportunity to have a primary care physician so that we can keep their health intact. And that's so important, to establish that relationship early on so that when issues arise, you know who you can call and talk to and schedule an appointment to get in so you can maintain your health and keep your health on the up and up, to make sure that we don't have those problems, those lingering problems to persist.
Absolutely. One of the things that you said, and I think it's true, we'll walk around with pain. We'll walk around knowing our back, or we have a lump or a spot on us, and we'll just keep going. And then when we do go, we're not going to see a primary doctor. We're going to the ER room, and usually is pretty advanced or pretty bad when we do walk in. And I know this section that we're dealing with is dealing with health, but something that we haven't touched upon, and I'll just touch it, is our dental, our oral health as well. And we know that leads that what's in your mouth travels throughout your body, and that plaque and all those that bacteria and things, that they have a profound effect upon your health as well. Senator Peters, was there a time where you had to intervene with a friend or a family member to support their health?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I do this with everybody, to be honest with you. I mean, just me personally, to give you an idea, you're talking about the dentist. I would not go to the dentist, I think, for quite some time. I don't want to say for how long, but it was during the pandemic that my fiance convinced me to go visit the dentist. And it was, I mean, I had an amazing dental hygienist who was not, growing up, I felt like the person who was trying to deal with my health, anything involving my health, was not the nicest of people. And I had a dental hygienist that basically helped me get through that. I'm very open about it. And at this point, I go to the dentist maybe a little bit too often because it's worked out well. And I learned a lot about my health in terms of the dentist, for example. Or when I was younger, I would just work, and then not go to the doctor myself. And then I experienced losing my dad to cancer. And I was 26 years old, and I had this like moment where I was like, oh no, like this, it's gonna come for me. And I started going to the doctor regularly. And I sort of want to piggyback on a thing that both Napo and Senator Sims pointed out, which is we need to have more people who look like us in the positions of doing our healthcare. That's like a vitally important part to building that relationship. I go to right near my office. I had an ankle injury, and I had a Black man for a doctor who talked me through it and worked with me through it. When it came to my dental care in this situation, she's a Black woman who understood how to talk to me about it and said, hey, you just gotta, she was like, I need you to floss more. But she was like, she was actually building that relationship and rapport with me, and did not dismiss me, or, as we say now, gaslighting people, and was actually having honest conversations with me about the things I need to go through in terms of healthcare. So to me, this is like vitally important in the relationship, is that you also have to have people who not only look like you, but have similar experiences, who might see things that other people tend to overlook, who know for a fact that you might come up with an excuse, right? I think I still, to this day, as we're talking about this, and just to be frank, I feel like I got to work and grind through it, that I'll move an appointment every month. I'd be like, I'm going to come back to it. But at least I'm like, I got to keep the appointment somehow on that calendar. And then we'll tell you like, hey, you're supposed to come in two months ago. Where were you at? And I think that's just like a vitally important piece to make this work, is that it's the relationship starts with who you're relating to, in my opinion. So I think that's sort of like the whole thing. And I just admitted a lot about my dental care. Let me tell people, if you can't go to the dentist, and if you're able to, get a water pick, that's all I got to say. So thank you.
Hey, real quickly, as we wrap up this segment, is there any health advice, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, Senator Sims, is there any health advice you would give your younger self?
I would say prevention is key. I think we've all touched on this a little bit as part of our talks this morning. You don't, when you go to the doctor or dentist, you waiting until it's too late or till the pain is so severe, it's unhealthy. So if I could say to my younger self, prevention is key. It's no different than, again, with your car. You get your oil changed every 3,000 miles. You rotate your tires every 10,000 miles. That's preventative care, because if you don't, ultimately your engine's going to lock up, and the cost to repair that is much higher. The same is true here. As Senator Peters was talking about the relationship with his primary care physician, I was thinking back to my recent health experiences. All of I just had to have knee surgery, and I've got a Black doctor. Both the primary care and my surgeon were both black doctors. And when I went to see both of them, Senator Harris alluded to this earlier about the strength that we try to exhibit when we go to see doctors. And I remember, sitting there with both my doctors, as my primary care physician was examining me, and then my surgeon was examining me, and holding back the pain and not experiencing or not expressing how much pain I was in. And both of them said, separately, without having talked to each other, it's okay. It is okay to be in pain. So I say I can't help you if you don't adequately tell me what's going on or appropriately tell me what's going on. So if I could give myself some advice, I would say, one, prevention is key, and two, establish that relationship with your primary care physician and be honest with them, because they're professionals and they can help you through it. And three, find someone that you connect with.
Okay, Senator Harris.
Yes, I was going to add to that and say I totally agree with Senator Sim that prevention is key. But for me, from just my background being a former professional athlete, I'll tell you what I would tell my younger self as of today. I believe I stay in pretty good shape now, but I would tell my younger self to change my diet, because the thing that you put into your body will have an effect one way or the other, whether positive or negative, depending on what you put into your body from a food standpoint, whether it's red meat, whether it's fish or vegan, whatever diet you choose, that's your choice. But I believe in everything in moderation. I don't believe in one thing over the other. I eat pretty much whatever if I burn it off, but the overall thing is make sure you're getting proper exercise, make sure you're getting proper rest. And one thing that we all touched on in this conversation that's going to be a topic overall about men's health is our mental health. That's one of the things that I would tell my younger self, to try to compartmentalize things versus letting all that be weights, as Senator Peters talked about, being weights on you. As Black men, we bear a lot anyway. And a lot of, and whether that's physical, mental, financial, is so many pressures of being successful, or what success looks like in your community and in your household. So the mental aspect of that is we put so much pressure on ourselves to be the provider, to be that stronghold for our family, to be the glue that holds everything together. And sometimes when we fall short of our own expectations, it brings a lot of mental anguish upon us that causes us to have quote unquote breakdowns in our mental health, which leads to breakdowns in our physical health, because the mental controls the physical. And if we're not connected there, that's when you have those breakdowns in your health. And so I would tell my younger self to make sure, A, you're exercising, B, you're compartmentalizing things to release some of that mental stress that you put on yourself, and C, have a better diet so that your prolonged outcomes of your health are better.
Okay, Senator Peters, real quickly on that question.
Well, I sort of touched on it a little bit earlier in the previous one, but I'll expand on it. I think particularly when it comes to, and I think everybody else has said similar to what I would say, but I think the fact of the matter is to get through the mental barrier when it came to my dental care and when it came to that kind of stuff. I mean, I think the other one is not to believe that anything I was going through was predetermined. I think oftentimes I would think, oh, if this happened to me, it's because it was, this is just what's going to happen to me and I'm screwed and whatever. And something I've learned is that when you do that, then you don't actually go to do the preventative work that you need to do, or even go and treat the problem once it comes into existence, and you try to sort of either fight through it or you just try to brush it off. And I think if I would have told myself when I was younger, like, this isn't actually predetermined, it's something that I can actually deal with head on, I would definitely go back and tell myself to do that, especially at the start of my career, where I thought if I just work, and then I ignored it, then I don't need to worry about it. And maybe at some point I'll be, it will be fine. And I'll just finish with like a story I remember. I had a tooth issue, and I was working. I would work from, like 8 a.m. to like 11 p.m. At one point I decided to go to the emergency room. It was so bad I went to the emergency room, and they gave me antibiotics. And I remember this doctor being like, I don't know what is happening, but your immune system is working overtime. And I thought about that, like, oh, look at that. I'm very proud of how great my immune system is. The other side of that is maybe I shouldn't be working my immune system that much. Right. That's not healthy. That's not good for you, because there's going to be times where you need your immune system to be doing other work. And maybe you don't need to put it through the grind like that. And so I'm glad that my immune system held off in that situation, but that has a knock-on effect for impacting me when something else may enter my body and cause problems. So to me, it's about not thinking things aren't predetermined, not just trying to completely grind through it, and taking the time to treat your well-being. So
Awesome, awesome. So, so we've talked about why men don't like going to the doctor. Now let's kind of delve into why men are resistant to go to therapy. And Napo, I heard you touch upon it. LG, you touched upon, and as well as you, Robert, you talked about the mental aspect of our health. And as for me growing up and in my community, my neighborhood, it wasn't a kid, a black male particularly. Growing up, we all grew up with the don't say, don't tell what's going on in my house type of philosophy. And so you just never told anything. And even I think we kind of touched upon this earlier. You were looked at as weak if you went to go see a mental health professional. You just didn't do that growing up with us. It wasn't until I was a grown man, well in my 20s or early 30s, that I actually went to go see somebody about the stresses of life and things like that. You know, growing up with us, usually you find somebody in the Black church, and not to disparage any pastors or bishops or any clergy, but sometimes you need professional people who really understand how to unpack it all. And that, you know, that's what it was for me. But a study from Columbia University found the Black community suffers from an increased rate of mental health concerns, including anxiety and depression. So, Senator Peters, I know you are very passionate about this subject. Can you please explain the mental health needs in Black community that are often exacerbated and mostly unfulfilled?
yeah, I mean, just full disclosure, I'm going to go see my therapist later today. And I've been seeing my therapist now for, I think, a decade. I remember when I first met them, which was at a Halloween party, and I had a lot of trust issues. That's why I see a therapist, everybody. And I actually held on to their card for a whole month. Did not call because they gave me their card because we met at a party. I actually preferred that. That's how I met my therapist. I remember when I first went to therapy, I did not talk to my therapist for about 2 to 3 months, really, about anything, because I was too nervous or anxious to really open up about the things in my life. And then my mom passed away, and I was like, well, I guess I should talk about this. And ever since then, it's been truly a transformative experience for me. And I've even had another sort of breakthrough recently when it came to my therapy, and shows the value of therapy, at least for me. What I would say is we have seen, particularly in the pandemic, and I think there was some, I can't remember if there was oh my God, there's a journalist who did research on the rise in suicide deaths, particularly when it comes to Black men in Chicago. This has been a thing that was reported in the morgue. I think this goes back to that John Henry thing. There's a serious crisis when it comes to mental health. First, it's the access when it comes to mental health. Let's be blunt. It's not always going to be there. Either it's not open in the community, it's hard to find somebody. Then there's the fact that we don't have enough Black men who are therapists. So when we have a hiring concern and hiring issues there, particularly coming through social work. And then the other one is that if you're always stuck in the mindset that you have to, quote unquote, grind it out, it's hard to even make time to open up about that. And the other one is that if you have to be supposedly the strongest person, going to see a therapist has not necessarily been considered being the strongest person. And so I think we need to break through that barrier. For me, I thought it was a point of pride in my 20s, particularly in my late 20s, to be like, I don't see a therapist. Why do I need to see a therapist, right? Like, what am I going to get out of a therapist? And then, of course, it took me a moment of real serious crisis to finally go see a therapist. And then even then to engage in the awkward conversation of opening up, now to the point where I see a therapist 10 years on, where I'm literally talking about, I mean, sometimes I'll feel like I go to a therapy session and I'm just rambling more so than I do with you guys on a regular basis. And I'm just rambling. But what comes out of that is then my therapist might have one little insight that just like opens something up for me. And I have that like, oh, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And I carry that with me. And maybe I talk to about somebody. So I think it's about making sure that sometimes opening up is what we need to reduce those pressures. That's A. B, we need people who look like us in this profession. I think that's vitally important. That is a very serious issue. The pandemic has been particularly painful. It's led to a rise of death by suicide. That's been very painful. And that has a knock-on effect of trauma, right? If you're, a Black father, your kid, there's a death by suicide, that kid carries that with them. And so we need to be able to say to folks, yeah, actually, you should talk about that experience. And so I think that's sort of the pathway through it, what's happening, and sort of a pathway to get out of it.
That same study, that Columbia University study, excuse me, related to economic insecurities and associated experiences, such as violence and criminal injustice, further compounding the mental health disparities in the Black population. Senator Sims, as someone who has worked heavily on the criminal justice reform, what do you think needs to be done to tackle this head on?
I appreciate that question. And even your lead into this discussion, talking about our vulnerabilities. As you mentioned, Senator Belt, there's this feeling in the Black community, particularly that Black people don't go to therapy. We go to church. And you're having to fight that battle. This is not a new concept. Thousands of years ago, the Greek philosopher Aristotle said that poverty is the parent of crime and revolution, and we continue to see that coming on and continuing even to this day. We have a crisis of economic insecurity in our community and a lack and loss of hope. When you see that lack and loss of hope, then that's going to manifest itself in some very negative ways. When you have, and we've talked about Black men in particular being, having a higher incidence of being working class or being seen as working class, or also having a higher proportion of being involved with the criminal justice system. I really appreciate this discussion because it talks about, and it allows for us to talk about the vulnerabilities and the systemic trauma and the pressures that Black men and we as Black men feel, because there is this negative narrative that's created against Black men that is perpetuated every day. If you look at the 5 o'clock, the 6 o'clock, the 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock newscast, when crime happens, you are going to see this negative image and imagery that continues to perpetuate itself over and over again of this violent Black male. But you don't see on the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, or 10 o'clock news the positive stories that are going on in the community. You don't see the work that's being done by Senator Harris to do his coaching and his mentoring in his community. You don't see the work being done by Senator Belt and the work that you are doing on your college tour. You don't see the work that Senator Peters is doing in being on the front lines on dealing with economic insecurity. You don't see the work that I'm doing in terms of mentoring. Those are not stories that are often portrayed. And we are not, and as even though we are leaders, we are part of the 59 people who get the honor of serving in the Illinois Senate at any one time. We are not the exceptions. We are the rule. There are many more African American men doing positive things in our community that just don't get the limelight. They don't get the exposure. That positive narrative is not fed into, but the negative one is fueled. And that's why you see these policies be pushed in our criminal legal system, not our criminal justice system, because if you have a criminal justice system, there's justice for everyone. But when you see a criminal legal system, you see policies that are pushed to keep individuals down. And that's why the work that we have done in criminal justice and in reforming our criminal legal system is to push us towards a criminal justice system. And that's why, we have always talked about creating these pathways to opportunities, create these pathways to success. And that's the work that we've done, getting away from these negative narratives, pushing us towards showing the light on the great things that are happening in all of our communities by Black men and Black people across our communities to invest in upliftment. And that we need to check. So for me, I think we've got to focus on how we change the narrative and how we tell our story, and conversations like this help us to do that.
Senator Harris, then with all that's been said about our mental health, and you touched upon it earlier in a previous segment, then what can we do to take better care of our mental health? What does it look like? I mean, we know how important it is. We know that it has a direct implications on our physical health. So what do we need to do?
Well, we have to be vulnerable. Like I said before, vulnerability is key. And when you're not vulnerable, you hold everything in. And when you hold everything in, it produces stresses on your body. We have to be able to talk about things that are traumatic in our lives, things that maybe sometimes for us as Black men be embarrassing, because we are so strong, or we are taught to be so strong, that if we have anything that seems to be wrong with us, it's embarrassing. Oh man, they don't think I'm strong, they think I'm soft, so I'm embarrassed by that. Or I don't make as much money or can't provide the way I want to provide for my family. That's embarrassing to them. We have to be vulnerable in such a way that if it's not a professional, as Senator Peters was mentioning earlier, we have to be able to confide in someone, a friend. We have to be able to confide in someone to be able to release those stresses off our mind, so we can, gather our thoughts and be more productive citizens. And I think that's very important, to be able to just have an outlet. A lot of times we don't have outlets because, like I said, we've been trained in our community, and you mentioned it earlier in your opening comments, that, hey, boys don't cry. You fall off your bike, get up, brush yourself off. Don't worry about it. You're okay. As Big Mom used to say, put some tussin on it. So there are things that we pass down from generation to generation about toughness, but it's like putting a Band-Aid over a gunshot wound. We're not addressing the problem. We're just simply passing over, being passive over some of the potential solutions to the problem. So we have to sit down and talk about it. We have to be vulnerable. We have to take systemic approaches to say, hey, these are the steps that I'm going to take to make sure that my mental health is intact. And therefore, once my mental is intact, the physical will follow. Because now I've set forth a plan, as Senator Sims said earlier. You have to have a plan, and you have to not only have a plan, you have to have a firm belief in how you're going to execute your plan. You got to say, hey, these are the steps that I need to take, and these are the processes that I'm going to use to execute my plan. So I think when you put those two together, that's the way you come out of this situation, with us being more vulnerable, with us being more open to have those discussions amongst men and amongst going to seek professional help, and not seeing it as a stigma, but seeing it as an opportunity to get better.
Got you. Prostate cancer. Sometimes we don't want to go to the doctor, even when we know something is wrong, because we're scared to know what it is or just how bad it is. But this kind of logic can be counterproductive, especially when it comes to certain diseases. Early detection is what prevents exacerbated health issues and even death for so many diseases. Senator Sims, for example, a new study suggests that Black men are more likely to die from low-grade prostate cancer. The risk of dying from low-grade prostate cancer is double that of men of other races. What are some things Black men should know about prostate cancer and its early signs?
Absolutely. I appreciate this question. This is one of those areas I'm very passionate about, because I've had loved ones and family members close to me who have died from prostate cancer. So this is an area where I've tried to invest a considerable amount of effort and awareness in my community about the early symptoms and warning signs. But knowing, first and foremost, it's knowing the symptoms. Knowing if you're having trouble urinating, or if you're having decreased flow in your urine, or blood in your urine, or semen, or if you're having unexplained weight loss or bone pain. Knowing the symptoms, as we've talked about throughout this conversation, understanding what not waiting until the end when things have gotten so bad that you don't that the response has to be extreme, but preventing them and knowing the warning signs up front, and not being afraid. For far too long we have been afraid to be vulnerable. We have been afraid to be proactive about our health care. But when you have the ability to know and understand what those underlying symptoms are, it can help you. But we can't be afraid to be vulnerable. We can't be afraid to not be focused on our overall health. And understanding what those symptoms look like, that's what's going to help us in the long term.
Absolutely. Senator Harris, House Bill 5318, sponsored by our friends and colleagues, Senator Emil Jones III and Representative LaShawn Ford, was recently signed into law by Governor Pritzker. Senator, as the chair of the Senate Insurance Committee, why was this legislation necessary?
It was definitely necessary because it can save lives. And I think anytime legislation comes before us that can save lives, we must act. I mean, I looked at this legislation similar to what's already been in place for a few years when it comes to breast cancer screenings. This is just the male version when you talk about prostate and males and men's health. This is something that all men should do on an annual basis, just like women get their breast checks every year. I have mine scheduled for in October. I go annually to go get the prostate check because we know we've had too many friends, colleagues, family members experience prostate health issues. And we know that if you're able to detect it earlier than later, there's treatments, there are things that you can do to prevent it or to stop the spread or to even cure it to some degree to make sure that it doesn't enter the body and be detrimental to your health and ultimately cause death. So the legislation was so important because it gave an opportunity for men to have screenings through their insurance that is part of their annual insurance premiums that they pay with their annual insurance that they have. And so it's important, and we have to utilize this. And the word vulnerability always comes up. We have to remain vulnerable to not put that pride on the shelf and go and get checked out. A lot of it is stereotypes. When you come to and say, man, I ain't getting my prostate check. I ain't having nobody touch me and do this. But fellas, trust me, it can save your life and it will save your life if you go and get checked. We have to go get checked and stop looking at everything through one lens. We have to have a broad lens and think about our health, the longevity of life, and what we as Black men mean to the nucleus of our families. We want to be around so we can raise our families. Absolutely. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is make sure that we check all the boxes as far as our health. And House Bill 5318 was definitely a great measure and a step in the right direction to make sure that our prostates are able to get checked on an annual basis. And hopefully that preventative methods will lead to breakthroughs to catch things early on to get treated.
And again, thank you. That was really to underscore and echo what you've said. Wonderful piece of legislation, transformative piece of legislation. We just have to make sure, it's been the undercurrent theme throughout this podcast, is that we educate the public that is there, right? That they can, that is now part of your insurance package. Senator Peters, what are general things everyone can do to support their loved ones who suffer from chronic illness? What are some things we can do?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a thing that I've had to do personally, and I think just in general, always check in with people. Like, first you ask people, how are you doing? And then they generally, as we've talked about, will be like, doing fine. Then you go, no, how are you really doing?
Right.
And get people to actually start talking to you about what they're going through. Then also ask people, what do you need? And then they're gonna go, I'm fine. And you go, no, what do you really need? And keep pushing. And what you don't do more than you can, don't make promises you can't keep, but be there for them and try to help them and try to have people out there to help them. And then understand that you're there for them to communicate and talk to them about what they're going through and what they need on a regular basis. I think that's just the most vitally important part, because it's hard for people, as we've discussed, to open up about what they're going through. And if you can't convey what you need, then you're never going to tell anybody what you need, and nobody's going to know what you need until you really need it. And so I think, to me, it's about that level of communication and relationship. The other part about this is, especially if it's a loved one, I remember when my dad was at the end point, he was very sick. And so I'm about to admit something I'm not supposed to admit. So we called to have an ambulance come get him. And it was going to take him to Stroger, but his oncologist was at Northwestern. And I came back, I had actually just lost my job. So I get my debrief after I've lost my job. So I'm not necessarily in the best mood about my life while I'm doing this. And I told the EMT folks, no, he's an oncologist at Northwestern. I need you to take him there. I was like, I'm going to do whatever I can to get him to Northwestern, where he was supposed to be at, because that's where his oncologist was. And that's all I really cared about. And so in my instance, it was basically also being like, I'm going to fight for this person who may not in this moment be in the position to be able to fight for themselves, because they have to put their energy into battling, say, cancer. And so when I think about this, it's not only about ensuring that people communicate to you, ensuring that you're asking them what they need and trying to push them to talk about that, but also knowing that there are times when you are there fighting for them, and that you have that expectation for people when you're in that position, that when you are at your most, difficult point, that because you've communicated to people about your needs, that they themselves know, this is what I'm going to do for you, right? This is what I'm going to do to fight for you, because we're in this together. So that's sort of my general viewpoint on that kind of stuff. It's just the value of communication, the value, as Napoleon pointed out, of vulnerability, and also the fact that we are in this fight together when it's someone that we love and we care about, and that we have to speak up and push people because we're trying to make sure that not only them, but the people who are supposed to help them are doing what they're supposed to do.
Great answer, great answer. As we talk about ways to support access to our mental and physical health, which we've done, telehealth is a huge asset. Senator Harris, you were the chief sponsor of the telehealth bill that passed through the General Assembly last year. Why was it important for hospitals and insurance companies to adopt and expand telehealth services?
Well, it was important because access is key. And House Bill 3308 provided just that. It opened up more access to not only the African American community, but to all communities regarding telehealth services, being able to connect with your primary care physician via communicative devices, whether it's FaceTime, whether it's Microsoft, whatever avenue that you were using as far as your technology, your mode of technology, to be able to communicate like we're doing now through Zoom. You're able to talk to your primary care physician via Zoom. And one of the most transformative experiences that I've had to see it before that bill was passed was I was able to sit in with a parent and her child for La Rabida and all the things that she had to go through to be able to transport her child to the hospital to get treatment, but yet the doctor was able to do those same type of treatments via teleconference and make the child more comfortable in that setting. It was transformative. And then to be able to expand not only that from the physical standpoint, but now you're able to talk with your therapist via technology. That was key. So the most important thing about that bill was it expanded access. So there, and you got to think, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. You have people in fear. They didn't want to leave their homes because they had the mask up, wearing gloves. They didn't want to be around people. So this was an alternative for people that were fearing from the pandemic, and also people that haven't been to the doctor. Now they can talk to their primary care physician and now get the treatment or the support they needed that way as well. So overall, it was just great because it expanded the access to opportunity in healthcare on multiple levels, the physical level and the mental level.
Great answer. And it really is the intersection in healthcare and technology. And that bill really embraced that intersection. So again, wonderful bill, huge impact on underserved communities as well, right? Whether it's an urban hub or rural hub, it was access is what you spoke of, and that's huge. Senator Sims, we know that telehealth services were important in keeping families or individuals social distancing throughout COVID-19 pandemic. But what else does it help now that we have fewer pandemic-related restrictions in place? Further, why is it important to even continue telehealth services beyond the pandemic?
Just and building on the conversation you were just having with Senator Harris, I think it's important that we talk about this new reality. The pandemic showed us and created a necessary pathway for us to address and accept the realities of technology and how we can then build technology in our everyday lives. None of us could have imagined that before the pandemic, this would be one of our regular modes of communication now, doing Zoom meetings. This is something straight out of the Jetsons. This is, when we were kids, we didn't know we'd be communicating this way. But now this gives us the way to accept this new reality and to look at where we are and how we are going to move forward. Because as we keep talking, one of the things we've been talking about today is about, one of the things we've talked about is access. When you have telehealth and you're able to engage in telehealth activities, it allows for someone to access healthcare in a way and in a manner that in a space where they're comfortable. Imagine being able to see your primary care physician from the comfort of your own home where you are comfortable. Because there are still some folks who don't believe that, while the pandemic restrictions are ending, the pandemic is still not over. We've moved into an endemic, but there are still folks who are getting COVID-19. There might not be as many people dying, but they're still getting people who are getting COVID-19. I just came from a conference where the conference had to move partially virtual because several people came down with COVID. I've got a family member who just contracted COVID. I've got another colleague who just contracted COVID. So this is still not over. So we've got to be mindful of that. But having then the work that the Senate and Senator Harris and the Senate Insurance Committee have done to invest in increasing and expanding telehealth services, it allows us to move into this new phase and this new reality where we can access healthcare in a totally new way, where people can be encouraged, as we've been talking about, to engage and to work in providing themselves access to those healthcare opportunities to make themselves more healthy.
Awesome. Guys, look, it's we've covered a lot of ground today, and as we wrap up today's discussion, what are some next steps that we can take here in the Senate to continue that progress and expand upon the progress that we've made, i.e. telehealth, prostate, or other cancers, insurance, or any other health matters? What are some things going forward that we can make it better? Because really that's what we are supposed to do in the General Assembly. We're supposed to make things better.
Well, one of the things I'll say, Senator, is making sure that we eliminate any and all barriers relating to access to healthcare, no matter what sphere that's in. We need to make sure that the access is equitable, that it's accessible, and that we can get to it when we need it. And two, it's the information. information is only valuable if you have access to the information. You brought this point up. You say, hey, we do all this great work down in the city, in the Senate and in Springfield, but do our constituents know that it exists, and how do we get the information to them in real time for them to be able to access when needed? So I think those are some of the things that we need to take a look at, making sure that the access remains there, that the barriers are eliminated, and that we can actually disseminate this information to our constituents so they can actually utilize it.
Excellent point. I always say information is not to be sat on, it's to be disseminated, right? And it's the old adage, if a tree falls in the forest with nobody around, does it make a sound, right? We can do all this wonderful work, but if it does not hit our communities, what good is it, right? Senator Sims, what health advice would you give to me, NAPO, your constituents, to anyone that happens to listen on this Zoom podcast?
Absolutely. I would suggest and say that one of the things that you've heard from us talk about over and over again is be vulnerable. Because to me, vulnerability equals strength. It opens you up to possibilities. If you look at when a storm comes, an oak, which is a rigid tree, is a strong tree, can be toppled by a storm, but a bamboo tree can stand up to a hurricane because it's pliable, because it's not rigid. So the same is true here. We have to be vulnerable. We have to be flexible. We have to be open to possibility to receive the ability to have the healthcare that we deserve, but also have the life expectancy that we demand. I would say for anyone listening to this podcast, go see a doctor. Go and get a full healthcare screen. Make sure that you know and have a full picture of what your health looks like from top to bottom. And that also means, understanding what you're putting into your body, what your diet looks like, how much sleep you're getting, because all of those, health is not one thing, but it's all things. It's not just, is my blood pressure high, but my sugar's low. It's all things. So we've got to have a plan, and that comes back to having a plan. If we can plan for our financial future for our children and for our families, we've got and that part of that financial plan includes us being here. So I would say have that plan for and the discussion with your family about your health care. Have a discussion with your primary care physician about your health care so you can understand it. But then also, and this is a point I think Senator Peters touched on. I thought was very poignant. Was that communicating those desires to your family? Have a healthcare plan. I was talking to one of my legal colleagues recently about some of the some cases that they had come into contact with. He does a considerable amount of the state work, and he had two different experiences. One where the deceased individual had a full plan from finances down to how the funeral was going to be structured. The other person had no plan, and it was absolute utter chaos when the person died. Family was fighting. Everything is in court, and when something like that happens, who gets paid? The lawyers. So having a plan and being able to communicate that to your family will save them long term. So investing in your holistic health, but also investing in that plan for after when something happens to you, you can direct your family accordingly.
Absolutely. And I would just add on that segment as well. Guys, take your meds, right? If you execute your game plan and you go see a doctor and you get put on meds, take them. Take them when you feel great. Take them. Obviously, you're going to take them when you don't feel as great. But take your meds, right? Because that's part of the overall plan. In closing, let me say this, guys. It's always a pleasure whenever I could get together with you, LG, Napo, Robert. It's just always good. And you know, that's one of the great things about being in the General Assembly. It brought me into contact with you all, and this is beyond the General Assembly. This is beyond the Senate. I like to think that we're friends for life. LG, you and I were at Illinois State together, the Harvard of the Midwest, and so, you know, these foundations matter, and you know, moving things forward. So this has, anytime I can come and have a conversation about something as profound and as relevant as Black men's health. You know, it matters. As you all know, I'm a kidney transplant survivor. I had a kidney transplant in 2010, and I to LG's, to your point, I go see the doctor. I have my monthly work done. I take my meds. Napo, to your point, I watch what I put in my body because it all matters. And so, you know, it's impactful. This conversation was great. I feel a lot better even after talking to you all about it, because there's some commonalities, no matter in our community, the larger community, that we all have to fight. And so with that being said, parting shots, and I'll start with you, Senator Sims, and then you, Senator Harris.
Well, again, Senator Bell, thank you for moderating this discussion. I thought it was, we had some profound insights that came out throughout this discussion. And I like you, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to and talk with the Black men in the Illinois Senate, because we have a unique bond and a unique experience. And I appreciate having the opportunity to be able to share that experience with all of you, and also to all of our listeners of this podcast. And I hope they take the advice that we laid out to heart. And if you haven't had your physical, go see the doctor. If you feel the need to find a mental health professional, please find one. You know, I know the person who I would confide in and talk to the most was my dad. And something good happened, I called my dad. Something bad happened, I called my dad. Like during the beginning of the pandemic, my dad passed, and that is a void that has existed in my life since. That I would say, if you've had those kinds of challenges, work through them, because that's what I have had to do, and work through that. But take the advice to heart that we've given you, and even if we can be a resource, don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us, whether you live in our districts or not. Reach out to us, because that's what we're here for. We're here to help. We're here because we want to be a resource for our communities. We want to be a resource for anyone who we can help. You know, that is the purpose. So, you know, I would love to, if anyone needs assistance in helping to find and identify a primary care physician, reach out to me. Our office will help you do that. If you need access to state services, reach out to us. And that's one of the things I'm very proud of, is the investments that we've made in healthcare in our state budget, because as we have paid down old bills, and we've gotten credit rating upgrades, we've invested more in healthcare. That only happens because we have a plan, and I'm very proud of that work. And that work is only successful because of my colleagues on this call and the work that we do in the Illinois Senate. So thank you, Senator Bell, for moderating this discussion. I thought it was very, very profound, and I was just proud to be a part of it.
Senator Harris, before you jump in, Senator Sims, you brought me to a point. If anyone watching this telecast, and if you're going through a mental health crisis, please dial 988. 988. Again, we in the budget, we funded that crisis hotline with $5 million. And so if you're going through anything, know that, and you can't reach out to your parents or to your families, to your friends, know that you can dial 988, and there's someone waiting on the other end to talk to you. Senator Harris.
Well, I'm going to be brief, Senator. I just want to say thank you so much for moderating this panel on men's mental health. Thank you to my colleague, Senator Sims, and Senator Peters for joining in on this discussion. It was very profound that we can come on here and talk about why it's important to go see our doctors, some of the things that we need to do to prolong our health, and planning and strategy in order to do that. I think anyone that's listening to this podcast, if you need assistance, you need any help, as Senator Sims says, please reach out to any one of us, whether you live in our district or not. We are here as a vessel and as a resource to help you. We want your life to be better. We want your health to be better. And together we win. And that's why it's important for us to have these conversations so that we can, as they say, take the veil off and become vulnerable and exercise that by having these sometimes difficult, or not difficult, but more so uncomfortable conversations, because sometimes people don't have that person to go talk to. They don't have that support system at home that others may have. But as Senator Belt says, if you're having a mental health crisis, you dial 988. We have a hotline set up for you to get help on the other end of that line, professional help, not just you venting to your homeboy or your friend, but professional help. And it's okay to do that as well, because we need to release those things off of us so that we're not feeling that pressure, which in turn releases negative toxins in our body. And so we want to make sure that everyone on this call understand that our health is our wealth. And I think Senator Sims mentioned this previously. Health is a lot of different things. It's not just what you eat. It's what you think. It's how you exercise. It's going to the dentist, going to get checked out mentally, to make sure that that ailment that's on your backside, that lump that's on the back of your shoulder or your back of your neck, it's a lot of combination of things that creates the health package. So we have to do everything we can to compartmentalize things to make sure this box is checked, this box is checked, this box is checked, and collectively that gives us our whole health outcomes. So I'm excited. I'm thankful that I was allowed to be on this panel today. As the chairman of insurance, we make sure that we are looking at all type of ways we can to best maximize our insurance across the state, so that a lot of the things that we're talking about on the health side are covered or a part of your health insurance package, so that there are no outstanding or excessive fees when you're going to, you say, well, I can't afford to go to the doctor. No, everyone can afford to go to the doctor because your life depends on it. So I encourage each and every one of you, if you don't have a primary care physician, to please seek out one. Get someone that you can go and take an annual checkup every year to make sure we stay on top of it, so that we can prevent some of those negative things from happening, because prevention is better than taking care of the problem once it exists. So once again, thank you for having me on today, and I appreciate the conversation.